The government has struck a deal with union leaders in a bid to end the long-running pay dispute, which has seen junior doctors strike 11 times since March 2023, affecting hundreds of thousands of patients. Junior doctors will now vote on the offer, which is based on 2 years of earnings and is worth a reported £1 billion. They had pushed for 35%. But Chancellor Rachel Reeves signed off the deal, despite making cuts elsewhere to plug a £22 billion overspend, as she called it, by the Tories. Her predecessor, Jeremy Hunt, said public sector pay rises were a political choice she didn't have to make. This is the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, defending her decision. Watch out for the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, getting a bit spiky too.
The last government presided over the worst set of strikes in a generation. This caused chaos and misery for the British public, and it wreaked havoc on the public finances. Industrial action in the NHS alone cost the taxpayer £1.7 billion last year. That is why I am pleased to announce today that the government has agreed an offer to the junior doctors, which the BMA are recommending to their members. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will set out further details. Let me pay tribute to him. His leadership on this issue has paved the way to ending a dispute which has caused waiting lists to spiral.
OK, so he's shouting 3 weeks, Wes Streeting, at the Conservative benches. We've got here 3 pictures. So we have the junior doctors, the former Chancellor, and Rachel Reeves, the current Chancellor. And the situation is this, OK, that Rachel Reeves essentially says to Jeremy Hunt, you messed it up. I've got no money. That's what she was saying yesterday. She then turns to the junior doctors and says, have a big pay rise and stop the strikes. At which point, the former Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, comes in. He says, you've got no money, Rachel, because you gave them a big pay rise. And when he says them, he points at the junior doctors. And that's this sort of, we could call it this triangle of anger that we've got here. And we focus on one figure, 2 figures, but one figure. 22 billion pounds, 22%. Why do we say 22%? Let's go there first. The answer is that's the deal we mentioned between Rachel Reeves and the doctors. Details, break them down here. Existing pay rise of 9% already agreed. 4% backdated pay added in. Then an extra 6% for 24-25 and an extra grand. Put it all together, you get 22%. 22 billion is the money now being chopped by the Chancellor. This is the Sun. They're going through it. I'll take it from the bottom. Axing adult social care charging reform. Stopping Boris Johnson's 40 new hospitals. Railway Restoration axed. Tunnel at Stonehenge axed. Rwanda, we know about that, axed. 2 billion plans for an advanced British standard qualification gone. Then saying to Whitehall departments, you've got to find £3 billion of savings. And this one, you end the winter fuel payments for OAPs who aren't in receipt of pension credits. In other words, only the poorest will get them. So that's her way of saving 22 billion. He says to her, you only need the money because you're throwing it at the doctors. And how do we work out who's in the right here, Albie?
I think that's a fair point that the former Chancellor, now the Shadow Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has put to the current Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Politics is all about choices. There is a lot of money that the government raises through taxation. I think the £22 billion black hole is about 2% of the revenue which is raised from taxation. This is money that can be found by either raising taxes slightly, cutting back in other areas, which looks like this is what Rachel Reeves is doing. So it's not hard to find this money. But the question is that I'm wondering is that Rachel Reeves was saying on the media around this morning that the independent pay review body, when they were sent out to find a pay settlement for the junior doctors, and all the doctors were not given an affordability criteria by the former government. So why didn't Rachel Reeves just send the independent pay review body off again to do the work, but this time put some sort of affordability criterion in, so we actually find something which is affordable, because I don't think this is.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's odd that she would say, we didn't tell them to find something affordable, but I'll pay it anyway.
Exactly.
So what do you think of the pay settlement? Do you think it's too much?
No, I think they deserve it.
Right.
I really do think we should look after our doctors, our nurses, all our healthcare workers and our teachers. You know, they are the pinnacle of this country, and we've just, you know, a junior doctor, £32,000, 48 hours a week work.
It's a funny thing, though. We've put more money into the NHS and we've got more staff in the NHS, but over the period of measuring it, we haven't treated more patients. So the worry is you put money in, but you don't get results. And quite where you go after that, I don't know. But the Chancellor's revelation the government would axe winter fuel payments for all but the poorest pensioners was controversial, as you can imagine. She says that'll save £1.5 billion a year, but as many as 10 million pensioners could lose out. Take a look.
I am making the difficult decision that those not in receipt of pension credit or certain other means-tested benefits will no longer receive the winter fuel payment from this year onwards. The government will continue to provide winter fuel payments worth £200 to households receiving pension credit, or £300 to households in receipt of pension credit with someone over the age of 80. Let me be clear, this is not a decision I wanted to make.
Essentially, you've got to be much poorer to get the winter fuel payment. What do you think of that, Amanda?
I think it's right. She's got to claim, she's got to get money back somewhere. And I mean, I've got a colleague of mine, she's 79, she's still working full time. Her husband has a good pension. They've got a good household income. They don't need it. They will take it.
Yeah, I mean, famously, there are pensioners in Spain who are claiming it.
Yes. And this is what is happening. You know, our benefit system was put in, which is fantastic, but put in to support people in, you know, in times where they need support. It wasn't put there to fund lives.
Because that argument will be used when they say that rich people don't need the state pension. That's where it's going. So that's where it's going, isn't it? It's going to... But when I say rich, I don't mean Richard Branson, Mick Jagger. I mean anyone who's got more than £100,000 saved up can be told they don't need a state pension now. And at that point, you get a riot.
Yeah, I think they pay tax.
I think the state pension should be means tested. I do.
Do you?
Wholeheartedly.
Do you, Amanda, as well?
State should be means tested.
I think if you contribute and you pay tax... And
everyone contributes and pays tax.
Well, I've got a lot of friends that haven't paid any tax and they've lived off the benefit system for their entire life, you know.
Why are you friends with them?
Well... because they're nice people.
No, OK,
you know?
I'm kidding you.
And I'm not putting everybody in the same
They may also
category.
be in desperate need as well.
Yes.
You're not suggesting they've scammed the system, right?
Well, I think it's very easy to do.
Right.
I think
I'll come back to my original question.
I think it's very easy to do sometimes, and this is the problem. We are putting money to people that don't need it, and we have to claw back in all directions.
But you know there is an argument. The argument is this, that if you take... It's always invidious to choose one rich person, but let's say Philip Green, the famous guy who, you know, ran Next and everything, or Michelle Mone, right? No, let's not choose her. Philip Green paid a lot of tax. And on that basis, you can give him a little bit back in the form of a state pension, so he feels there was a reason to pay all that tax.
But he's already got a lot back from the life that he's had in the United Kingdom. He's had access to the education system paid for by taxpayers, access to the healthcare system paid for by taxpayers, access to all these public services paid for by taxpayers.
So you withdraw the NHS from people as well, would you?
My views on the NHS is it does need to be reformed. I'm not someone that thinks it needs to be free at the point of use for everyone. Might be unpopular, but I think a lot of people could afford a co-payment for NHS treatment.
So he hasn't had the education, everything. He's put money in to receive that, hasn't he? There's so many people out there that don't put anything in and they're still entitled to it.
I have nothing against people who are on benefits receiving things like healthcare. I think that's important.
Yes.
But if you can afford to contribute towards some of your pension or towards some of your social care when you're older or towards some of your healthcare whilst you're of working age, I think you should.
Yeah.
There's no problem with that, in my opinion.
OK, well, let's talk about the doctors' pay now. And joining us is Junior Dr Basha Mukherjee. And hello there. Are you pleased with this 22%?
I personally am. I think 20 months has been a really long wait. And actually, personally, I started to feel very hopeless. And actually, West Streeting has shown us, not just by this number that he suggested, but actually by acting so promptly, that he is willing to take doctors' plea seriously. He values doctors and he's actually suggested a respectable number for once, which the Tory government didn't do for the last 20 months. So I'm actually quite happy.
It shows how powerful you are, because basically what they've said is, excuse me, they need to pay you less than your strike is costing the NHS. Now, on that basis, you can go on strike again next year and get even more, because you're very, very powerful indeed.
Well, I wouldn't use the word powerful, but I would use the word valuable. I think West Streeting and the current government clearly understand the cost it has been to not pay the junior doctors fairly. We have been losing over 20,000 doctors every year, more or less. In the last 1 year, we lost 20,000 doctors, which cost the government £2 billion. And in the last 1 year alone, to basically pay for filling the shifts, essentially, this cost them 3 times the amount as it would have done to just do the pay restoration. So I think the word here is valuable, not powerful.
OK, I know it's invidious, this, Basha, but there will be people who say that the doctors' pay rise is being funded by the cuts elsewhere, and that includes, of course, the end of winter fuel payments for all pensioners but the poorest. What would you say to that?
I mean, the cuts has to happen, hasn't it? I mean, this is what the government's turned our entire kind of the money pot into. The last government, that is. They put cuts in every area of public services, which is why I personally, as a taxpayer, feel that my taxes are not well used, essentially, because the police they're not doing their job well. The NHS, you can't rely on that. Schools are, spilling out, and they're not well managed at the moment. So I think the way the government has led the country and where they've spent the money in the last 14 years is the reason why we're having to do these cuts.
I see,
not the
yeah, but I see Albie frowning, because if you think hang on, sorry. I see Albie frowning because the idea that your taxes are not being well used and you want more spent. That was
yes. So my question to you, Basha, would be, if you think your taxes aren't being spent well by the government, do you think you should be paying more tax or less tax?
I think considering the state of the services, we should be paying less tax, or at least getting rebates for good financial behaviour, for actually going to work. But this government has just been, we've been talking about the boats coming in and the mismanagement of the funds for a long time now. And that's precisely it. Unfortunately, the people managing the money, I don't feel they're managing it very well as a taxpayer myself. And I don't feel rewarded as a taxpaying member. And I don't feel that there are good returns for the taxes I'm paying for.
Well, I mean, a massive amount goes to the NHS. It's $200 billion a year, isn't it?
Yes, I think it's 11%.
Massive. Maybe it's all being spent the wrong way. I don't know. I don't know why it's so broken. Thank you, Dr. Basha. After the break, we're taking your calls on whether a 22% pay rise for junior doctors, like Basha, is too much, especially when things like the winter fuel allowance for lots of pensioners being cut. 0207 862 2222. Or do you think, no, this government had to sort out the doctors' strike by throwing money at it? See you shortly. First, let's talk a bit more on the 22% pay rise for junior doctors. Is it too much? 0207 862 2222. Let's take some calls. Richard in West Yorkshire, what do you think of our discussion on this?
Good morning. I think the doctors deserve a 22% pay rise. My problem is for taking it from pensioners who need the heating on more in the winter. Not all pensioners can manage, even though they're not on benefits. It's going to create health problems, put more pressure on the NHS, and the people who are giving the 22% rise to are going to be treating them. They should be taking it from other areas. Cut illegal immigration straight away.
Richard,
take it out of the immigration budget.
Sorry.
Take it out of the immigration budget. Take it out of illegal immigration. Shut hotels. You will solve many problems this country is facing. Knife crime, lots of different things, and taxpayers will be getting value for money, like the junior doctor beforehand pointed out.
But the immigration budget is going to be used, apparently, for border force to stop people coming across the channel.
That is not going to work. No. Close 4-star hotels, deport people. This country is in crisis, and it's about time people woke up to that. And I'm speaking for every taxpayer in this country, every old age pensioner, every child, everybody. All right.
Just on the pensioner thing, you believe there are people who need the winter fuel payment, even though they're not on pension credits. That's the key thing, right?
Of course. Of course, people people who are at home cannot afford to keep the heating on all day, but they need to stay in good health. It's not like they can go out to work and be out of the house and save on heating that way. People need to get real here. The government need to get real. The government need to look after our own people before anybody else.
All right, Richard, thanks so much for your call. Kathy in Lancashire, hi.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hello, what do you think?
Hi,
Is it too much or about right for the doctors?
Well, let me tell you this. I'm on PIP. Do you know what we got? 6.7% increase.
That's
Now,
the benefit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because I've got a life-threatening condition.
Understood. So personal independence plan. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you tell me? They've got 22%. I've got 6.7%.
It does. I mean, Amanda, you answer that. Does it sound unfair when it's put like that?
No, I don't think it does. I mean, they've been fighting for a long time. You know, without our doctors here, we're not going to have people to look after you. So, you know, we have to invest in our doctors, and we're just losing so many of them. So I think that the Chancellor's done the right thing.
Kathy?
Live on.
Sorry, say again, Kathy, I couldn't hear it.
Sorry. What am I supposed to live on?
But you've had 6.7% increase, you said, have you?
Yeah.
Well, you've had an increase. Did you manage your pay last year?
I'm in debt.
Well, it's all about budgeting, Kathy, isn't it? And
Exactly.
I think
Well,
it's
so
all
why
about
don't the
budgeting. And I don't. Go on.
I don't get a lot to live on. I'm already in debt. I'm never going to get out of it.
I know.
You don't think they should give the 22% to the doctors, Kathy?
I do not. They should cut their cloth accordingly.
Oh,
I don't have a choice.
Okay, Kathy,
I was
thank you.
medically retired at 38.
Yeah, I do feel for you. I've been a single mum and worked, and it's very difficult. Only had one income coming in the house, and sometimes I had to decide, you know, on one bill or the other, and I know it's difficult, but we do have to invest in our doctors. You know, they work 48 hours a week on a £32,000 a year salary. What's that, £10 to £15 an hour? I'm sure delivery drivers and people get more than that. So, you know, I do feel for you and I sympathise with you, but I do think that the investment was needed.
Kathy, thank you so much. Carol in Derbyshire, hi.
Hi. Morning, Jeremy. Nice to speak to you.
And you, it's the government's gone quite a big move, this, isn't it? What you call, you know, they've gone large. They've said, OK, we have to sort the doctor strike. We're going to pay 22%. It sounds like an awful lot, but it will stop the strike.
Well, I'm not saying whether the pay rise is too much or not, but I think it's very necessary. We need to sort the doctors out. We need to get them back with us.
Yeah.
But the penalties of that is pensioners, for one, of which I am one. And I realise that a lot of pensioners can manage without the winter fuel payment, but there are a lot of pensioners that are borderline. They're not on benefits, but they're borderline, and they will suffer during the winter because.
Now that is, I think that is probably one of the key targets of this story, actually, Albie, isn't it? And this is where it's going: is the ones, always the ones just above the line, who will really miss the £300.
For me, that is not a strong enough argument, not for means testing. That is an argument saying everything should be universal, and I don't agree with that. I think people who can afford to pay their own way should contribute in some way, and there will be people around the fringes that might be less well off, but that shouldn't stop what is ultimately a good and fair policy.
Carol, the problem with the winter fuel payment before is that very rich people were getting it, and they were almost laughing.
I agree with that. And I agree that, as I've said before, there are people that don't need it. But it's just that border that is going to be the problem. You are going to people... I mean, there are a lot of people who absolutely need to be on benefits, but they won't go there out of pride, and they will suffer. OK,
Carol, thank you very much indeed. Good to talk to you all about this. So Labour can do anything at the moment because they've got this massive majority. They're not going to have any defeats in the House. Are they being bold enough, do you think?
I always think it takes a good woman to clean up the mess of a bad party. and I think we've got her.
You think Rachel Reeves is the...
Yeah, I do. I mean,
quietly the Prime Minister,
you know,
is
you
she?
have to, when you, any budgeting, your household budgeting, you know, you have to draw lines and think, do you need this, don't you need that? She has to be hard in some areas. And unfortunately, as Cathy did say, it's the people on the border that is going to suffer.
Before we move on, let's take a look at how Team GB...